Well, good afternoon to all of my YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter followers. I like to say my followers are my family. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. It's Tea Time with Bella. Now, I'm sure that you're looking at these two extraordinary men that really need no introduction, but I will honor them by, for some people who I don't know who may not recognize these two infamous faces. One is the one and only Ambassador Andrew Young, and the other beautiful man is Dr. George Frazier. I'm going to let them talk about themselves, but we're going to get right into this hour because we are talking about democracy and what it's all about. So, without further ado, audience family, raise your hands. I've been promoting all week. If you're not here, too bad. Look at the recording. Let me introduce Ambassador Andrew Young and Dr. George Frazier as I get out the way. How are you gentlemen doing this afternoon?
I'm doing fine.
I'm doing awesome. I'm sitting before royalty, and this is my third time. I cannot even believe that I've had the honor to speak to Ambassador Andrew Young on a third occasion. I've been spending all night thinking about what sensible questions I could ask him as a global influencer, as an elder statesman, as a civil rights leader, politician, diplomat, activist, pastor, confidant to Dr. Martin Luther King, almost soon to be 90. Just incredible. And thank you so much,
Well,
Ambassador.
thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Ambassador, we're going to do a little different today on the tea time. I am going to ask my dear mentor, which I'm saying publicly that Dr. G is. I'm going to let him just couch the conversation as I get out the way. Dr. G, take it away.
Thank you so much, Bella. And thank you for making this happen. It's all about your network, right? Your network will determine your net worth. Introduce me to your 5 closest friends, and that will tell me who you are. And Ambassador Young, this is our third conversation. The last two were powerfully engaging and watched literally by millions of people as we put that interview not only on Clubhouse, but all of my digital platforms, which are about 500,000 viewers. This one is going to go through the Black World Media Network. It's a brand new network that is a global network headed up by Don Rojas and Dr. Ron Daniels. It will go through iHeart Radio and Digital Media Mindstate. So I have a lot of strategic partners. So this conversation, yes, it is between you and I, but it's actually going to be between you, I, and the world. And so let me just get started. I want to ask you a question. I was going to say a tough question, but I don't think for you it's a tough question. I'm going to frame it. Ambassador Young, we have the 15th Amendment, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, 5 amendments to that act, 23 Supreme Court cases testing that act, now 52 restrictive state laws enacted in 2021. We have about 60% of Black people voting on our best day. What in the hell do we need to do to stop all of this and permanently maintain our right to vote? What do we have to do? Or will this be an ongoing fight for the next 5 or 10 generations?
Probably. And the reason is that, we used to sing a song, freedom is a constant struggle. We've struggled so long that we must be free. And there is a sense in which each generation is going to have to defend its rights and its citizenship. And we're going to have to advance it. Now, the thing is, we're doing that. And that's sort of the reason for the backlash. I can't take the credit for it, but, well, I guess I could.
Yes, you did.
That I ran my first voter registration drive in Georgia in 1956, and in Thomasville, Georgia. And we had trouble with the Klan, but we dealt with it. We had, we had that's where I learned that you don't count on the politicians, that the business community is far more sensitive and responsive. That when I went to talk to the mayor, the first thing he did was, let me check with the Sunnyland Packing Company and Flowers Bakery. Those were the two big employers. And both of them said, we don't want any conflict with the Klan in town. It's bad for business. And let the Klan meet on the courthouse steps, but don't interfere with Reverend Young's meeting at his church on Sunday. And it was Maynard Jackson's grandfather, John Wesley Dobbs, that got me into running this voter registration drive. And he said he would come down and speak to get us started. And I still remember what he spoke about. And it was very simple. He said, stick with this blue-eyed boy, but watch him.
Trust and verify.
Yeah. But whatever point he would make, that's the way he would conclude it. Stick with this blue-eyed boy, but watch him. And that's sort of inevitable. All men sin and fall short of the glory of God, and women do too. We're always looking for an easier way out, and there is no easy way. Freedom is a constant struggle.
Constant.
But when I ran for Congress and got elected in 1972, there hadn't been a congressman elected since the 1870s. And the day that I woke up, I was up early in the morning to get it going, 3:00, and it was pouring down rain. And I said, Lord, why did you do this to me? And because I was under the impression that our folk wouldn't come out in the rain. But we had organized the community. We had done a better job than I knew. But also there was a fire in the hearts of our people that wasn't going to be quenched by rain. And people stayed in line all day. And we had 72% of the Black vote turned out to vote.
Wow.
In the pouring down rain. And I was in a district that was only 38% Black. So I had to have a big Black turnout, but I also got close to 20% of the white vote, which surprised all of us. And so it's inevitable that we look at the world in racial terms and we define our struggle that way, but it may not be just that way. For instance, in Georgia now, we won two senators in Georgia, one white and one Black,
Right.
Both brilliant. And everybody was surprised that Georgia turned blue, as we say. I wasn't. And the reason I wasn't was that way back in 1990, I was talked into running for governor, and I didn't really want to run. uh, the only reason I wanted to make sure that if we had a lottery, um, that whoever was elected governor would designate the lottery funds totally to higher education and preschool. Well, I said higher education. And he was my opponent was from a small town up in the mountains, and he was an educator, and he believed in very conservative. Uh, he'd been Lester Maddox's assistant, and but he believed in education. Now, we also had on the board of regents um, two black members out of five, and they believed in education. And as a result of them using this money for higher education, Georgia State University here in Atlanta, which at that time in the 90s uh, was still just about 500 people, and it was seen as a local business school. Now it has 53,000. Now it graduates more black college graduates than any school in the world. They have 1,200 every year coming out that are black, but it also is graduating more white students than any other school around. And that means that the Republicans don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And they're focusing on color, and it really is education. The policies that we have introduced in Georgia have educated the population to the extent that I think that we have a chance to win in any race. But we also don't need to have just black candidates. And that, well, I went to Congress in 1973, and Joe Biden went to the Senate at the same time. So we roughly have had similar experiences in politics. And I think he's doing what we have seen needs to be done.
Right.
Now, a lot of people don't understand it, and it's not easy.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Ambassador, speaking of President Biden, I'm just going to do a hypothetical here. I'm going to make you president right now. So if you were president right now, knowing that breaking the filibuster would open the dam for a lot of things to get passed, like the George Floyd Policing Act. I mean, just we can just go right on down the list. The new voting rights, the John L. Lewis voting right. A lot of things could get passed if we could break past the filibuster. So if you were president, how would you handle Senator Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema? How would you handle that? What would be the politics of suasion?
I don't know whether it would have done any good, but I would have given them a pass. I wouldn't have spent nearly so much time on them. What I would do is find things that Manchin is interested in. And I think Joe Biden has done that to a certain extent. But I think you cannot let the 50 Republicans by with no responsibility. See, I just can't imagine. In fact, when I came to Georgia, one of the things that John Wesley Dobbs said to me was, "Look, I don't know whether you're a Democrat or Republican, but this year in Georgia, we're voting Republican." And I said, "Well, I've been a Democrat." He said, "Well, you could be a Democrat in school in Connecticut, but down here, if Stevenson is elected, Richard Russell and James Eastland will suggest who the federal judges are across the South.
Mm-hmm.
And if Eisenhower is elected, we are the only Black Republicans in the South, and we will get to name the judges that he appoints."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't know how much sense that made, but my experience now is that he was right, and that the Black Republicans nominated to the president and to the Judiciary Committee the judges that ought to be appointed. Now, we couldn't appoint Black judges back then, but we appointed the smartest and the most decent white people we could find.
Mm-hmm.
And everywhere we won a battle in the civil rights movement in the 60s, it was before a judge that Eisenhower had appointed in the 50s. Every single one. Judge Frank Johnson in Montgomery. The reason we marched from Selma to Montgomery was that in Selma, we were under the jurisdiction of a Mobile judge that had been nominated by Eastland. By marching to Selma, we got under the jurisdiction of Frank Johnson. And he was a fair and decent and wise man.
Mm-hmm.
In St. Augustine, Florida, it was Judge Simpson, Brian Simpson. But just about everywhere in Atlanta, I'm running out of the names, but they'll come to me. But the point is that we didn't need. Well, we used to say in the Black Caucus that we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests.
Mm-hmm.
And that there are times when you do what is best for the national interest, but also for the interests of Black people and poor people. And remember, there were a lot of people who were against Lyndon Johnson.
Right.
And they turned, and Lyndon Johnson had been a segregationist. Hubert Humphrey in 1968 was the most liberal presidential nominee we've had probably throughout. He had more experience with race and was more on our side than any other presidential nominee. And folk campaigned against him. They were just disillusioned and didn't want anybody white. So we had a string of we had 2-3 Black folk running for president, which just got us confused.
Mm.
So freedom is a constant struggle.
Yes.
It's never going to be easy, but we're never going to give up. And we're going to win much more than we lose.
Gotcha. I want you to put on your elder statesman hat right now from your very, very productive years as ambassador to the United States, United Nations. It's under Carter. There are some pretty serious global issues going on right now, as I know you know. The one that is immediately looking us in the face is the whole Ukraine, Russia, United States conundrum wrapped up in an enigma. If you were ambassador today, as an elder statesman, what advice and counsel would you give to the President of the United States if you sat in front of Putin? What would you say? And then I'm just curious about, so sort of like a two-part question. What is extreme sanctions? I know what sanctions are, but I've heard just mentioned recently extreme sanctions. What would that look like? But most importantly,
I think the sanctions, for sanctions to be effective, they've got to hurt somebody's pocketbook.
yeah,
And I think what the president means when he talks about extreme sanctions is interfering in some way with the bank accounts of the Russian oligarchs. See, they have money all over. In fact, I was with a gentleman who's been a freedom fighter in Venezuela, and he was talking about how the Russians have taken over an island, Margarita Island, off the coast of Venezuela, and turned it into a kind of Soviet playground. And so almost everything that happens now is global. Now, you can't deal with Russia without dealing with China. And China.
Well, my next question, but you beat me to
No,
it.
but it's the same question.
Right.
See, because how do we deal with a totalitarian state? That's one thing. And the second thing is, how do we deal with the oligarchs, the people? See, almost all these states stay alive because they're paying off somebody. And somebody's making money being powerful and not worrying about the legality. And I think that that's what you get in Russia. You get a lot of people who are moving their money around, largely, quite often. The banking system is still dominated by the US and England. You got to put France in there too. But the economies that drive the world are Western. And China can produce all kinds of little things, including this computer we're talking on. But if there isn't somebody to buy them, they're in trouble. And China and Russia are in trouble anyway.
Help us understand that. Unpack that.
Well, I was in China in year 2000 and met with a number of government officials. I was serving as president of the National Council of Churches, and we took a church delegation, and the young man who was the minister of cultural minorities happened to be a Chinese Muslim. And he asked to meet with me privately. And he said, we really could learn a lot from you, that you all have done a good job in integrating the diverse population that you have. He said, we are having trouble doing that. We're talking about, the figure he said was that they had something like 120 different cultural minorities. I don't know who they are, but we tend to look at China and think that all Chinese look alike.
Right.
They're not.
That's right.
The Uyghurs, I never heard of them much until now, but they're Muslim, and he was from that group, and he was in the government trying to keep peace with them. But then you also have Tibet and the Dalai Lama that does not want to be a part of China.
Right.
And China spends as much money on the military, percentage-wise, as we do. And they haven't had a war since 1979. They use their army to keep their people quiet and under control.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that can be successful in the long run. So that when you create economic, I mean, what we did in Birmingham was nobody black bought anything but food and medicine for 90 days. Now, that killed the economy of Birmingham. Now, that's what I think of as extreme sanctions.
I see.
See, that are economic and that are pointed as much toward individuals and who've accumulated wealth. But that accumulation of wealth is mostly in paper. See, it's stocks and bonds. And for the paper to be valuable, it's got to be tied to an economy that's thriving.
Right.
And the economies that are thriving are all part of NATO.
And Russia is not, by the way.
And
right.
Russia is not.
Right.
And China is not.
Right.
So that well, it's very delicate, but I saw it work in South Africa. And I saw it work in Zimbabwe. And I've never seen these extreme sanctions fail when you start hitting the big folks' pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's sort of what we've got to look at.
I have a little ghetto saying I use every now and then, and as I talk to my people, that the only way to deeply impact white people is to mess with their money.
Yep. Well, that's your extreme
sanction. A harsher word than mess with.
No, but that's what you mean. That's what you have to do with Russia, and those are the extreme sanctions.
Gotcha.
They're not bothering the military. See, all of these folk are stealing money from the people.
Yeah, I mean, they say Putin is one of the richest people in the world. That 250 billion is his worth.
Yeah, but it's not worth anything if you can't get to it and if you can't trade it.
Right.
There is, and I don't understand it fully, but I was on the banking committee for 1 year in Congress, and I learned a little bit about how the world money markets work, and that's where the real power is, through the International Monetary Fund.
Right.
And the value of currencies. The Ukraine, I mean, it's expensive having all of those troops lined up there. And nobody wants war, including the Russians. But I hope and think that we have some smart people there. working with Joe Biden. You remember Susan Rice?
Oh, sure.
See, Susan is as smart and tough a person as I've met, and she does it with a smile. I think that people are playing Kamala Harris cheap. Kamala was a district attorney in San Francisco when that was 20 years ago.
Right.
And she dealt with the problems of a big city. And San Francisco, because it was liberal, attracted more homeless, more crime, had more of everything. And she was sort of in the driver's seat, helping to deal with those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then she moved up to be Attorney General of the state of California, and then Senator from California.
Mm-hmm.
But it bothers me because she just happens to be small and pretty. And people, I wanted to knock the hell out of one of the commentators that was disrespecting her in his questioning.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they never would have talked to a white man that way. But she deals with it. And people underestimate her.
Yeah. Do you think she's presidential timber at some point in time?
Well,
Be elected.
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she was my first choice in the last in the last election,
Mm-hmm.
and I was glad to see her get on the be on the ticket.
Right.
But you know,
if you were to give her advice, because there is some criticism, whether it's warranted or not, that you don't hear.
One thing is not warranted. It is absolutely not warranted.
Right.
So people are talking about Joe Biden. Joe Biden has done more for black folk and women and poor folk, black and white, in 1 year than any other president we've ever had.
Right.
He's appointed more federal judges. Now, we focus on the Supreme Court, but he has appointed more federal judges to the circuit courts than any other president in our history. And when we go back to the first question, that's what I'm looking at. My daughter works for the American Civil Liberties Union here in Georgia. And we're going to have a hard time with the bill that they passed in Georgia, but it's going to be taken to courts, piece by piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, if you deal with the question effectively in the circuit courts, it's very hard to get a resolution up to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them will have to go to the Supreme Court. But I think what I see now is lawyers at the circuit court level in Georgia and Texas and Mississippi. You see, that's where that was the NAACP territory.
Mm-hmm.
That was where Thurgood Marshall got his training.
Right. So he made his bones.
Yeah.
No question. All right.
And I want to interject before you go on, Dr. G. It was 28 appointed people of color to the judges, Dr. G and Ambassador. And out of the 28, 8 of them are female black women.
Yeah.
We've never seen that before. Never.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I tell you what, it'll be interesting to see the reaction and interaction between the black woman that's appointed now and my brother Clarence Thomas. But it will probably not be through him. It will probably, I get criticized for saying this, but anybody that spends any time with a black woman gets an education. Every man. I don't care who he is. I don't care what his circuit, his there's just a woman's way of looking at things, and black women don't have any problem expressing themselves.
Yes, I've been married to one for 50 years.
You see why I love this guy, Dr. G. You see why he gives us our props.
All right. Amen and hallelujah. All right. Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I get people a little uneasy, but I said, look, I keep a copy of the Constitution handy. And when I read some of this stuff, and then I remember that most of his life, Thomas Jefferson shared a bed with a black woman.
Oh, yeah. Big time. A lot of children.
And you don't talk to a woman or sleep with a woman without getting some of her mind. I mean, when your head goes down on the pillow,
right?
You know, she doesn't stop talking.
This is true.
At least I've been married to two, one for 40 years and the next one for 25 years. Wow. And that's why the Bible says, never let the sun go down on your anger. Resolve your problems before you go to bed.
Yes. Yes. If you were advising, I want to get back to Kamala Harris's. If you were advising Vice President Harris on moves or things or contributions in her own style that she could make to heighten her profile, but at the same time still play the role of a vice president, because we know that most vice presidents are really low key, and
well, not the last. Well,
no, the last couple have not.
The last two Democrats,
right?
See, I mean, Mondale was very active with Carter.
Yes,
and
Joe Biden was very active with.
Joe Biden was very active with.
Dick Cheney was very active with Bush.
Exactly. And
so why can't?
But I tell you what, I never heard anything. I never heard a word that Dick Cheney said. See,
right.
We just knew that he was the hammer.
No, Bush's brain, as they said.
And when everything went on and went to Iraq and all of that kind of stuff, you just had to assume that was Dick Cheney.
Yeah. Right.
And well, let me get back to our vice president, because my advice is to the whole Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're still running the last election. I mean, they're still worrying about Pennsylvania, Michigan, which is true. But see, they hadn't counted on Georgia.
Right.
They hadn't counted on Arizona.
No.
And they did much better than they planned. But there's a part of the infrastructure bill. Now, they got it so divided, I don't know which is which. But she happened to be here with the president, and she asked to interview me. And I don't know whether I said it on camera or not, but what I said to her was that let the Democratic Party run the last election. You look for the next one. And the next election is down the Mississippi River. Now, I'm from New Orleans, and I grew up on the river. And I have watched that river flood, and I've watched those bridges, go up, and I've watched the the Mississippi River is the backbone of the United States of America. 40% of our trade goes down that river.
Mm.
And there's something like 130 some bridges across the river. If any of those bridges collapse like the one did in Pittsburgh across the Mississippi River, it would throw us in a national recession. Now, I started working through my foundation. I started asking, what are the things that need doing that nobody's doing? And see, we learned here in Atlanta, nobody much understands it, but we have the world's busiest airport. And it didn't cost the taxpayer one penny. See, we put no government money in the Atlanta airport. We went to Wall Street, see, and we structured it piece by piece so that the airlines and the truck drivers, the buses and the taxis and the concessions, everybody that's making money pays into the sinking fund that pays for the airport as it goes along. Now that airport generates, well, I talked to the general manager this year, and it's about $66 billion this year. And this is a bad year.
This is a down year. I mean, it's
a bad year. So
yeah, right. This is down.
We will function at about 40% capacity. And in 2019, we were at full capacity. We were still the busiest airport in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when we built it, we went to Wall Street, but it was black stockbrokers that took us to Wall Street. And Maynard Jackson, who got it started, would not do any business with any bond company that didn't have blacks at the vice presidential level or on their board. So we used our project to help integrate Wall Street. But we also had an endless supply of money. Nobody, I don't think, can tell you how much the Atlanta airport costs. See?
Right.
It was something like, every time we needed to do something, I got together with the airlines and we went to Wall Street. And we came back with money. And there was no argument.
Right.
Because we've had a AA rating, bond rating. And I've been trying to buy those tax-exempt municipal bonds. And I've never been able to buy even one. Because whatever they are, it's such a good investment.
Right.
That the pension funds and, things buy them up.
Yeah. Right.
Before we know how to get to them.
Right. Right.
But it means that Atlanta built the airport with no money.
Yeah, that's it.
We put on the busiest Olympics ever.
Right.
See, we raised $2.5 billion for the Olympics, no taxpayer money.
Correct.
We went to Wall Street. We went to the private sector. See, and everything was paid for itself, and we had $100 million left over. That's the reason Atlanta's growing so much. See? And most folk don't understand why we're growing, but we were less than 1 million people when I came here in 1961, and we're pushing close to 7 million now.
Wow.
And
I want to move the topic to Africa.
But let me stay on the cities.
Okay.
Because that's where the power, is. And you have 31 states that border on the Mississippi River and its tributaries. 29 of them are Republican. But they're Republican like Georgia was Republican. Georgia was Republican, but Atlanta was Democrat. See? And there came a time when it tipped, and Atlanta had more power than the rest of the state. And so we became a Democratic state. Now, our foundation has been working with 200 mayors between New Orleans and Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been trying to tell them that they don't have to wait for the government to do things with their city. They can go to Wall Street.
Right.
And we have brought Wall Street into our meetings with the mayors, and we've encouraged the mayors to develop projects and get them privately funded. And the hell with Washington. We don't do anything with Washington. Washington comes to us.
Right.
See, or did. Now Washington is being very helpful to Atlanta, and but I could get nothing from Reagan. I never tried to even make a call.
All right.
But we did everything we needed to do because we used private money.
Right. Private money. Well, and not only that, your private money was producing serious profits. And when you're producing serious profits using private money, you get what? More money, more money, more money.
But also, we didn't do with the Olympics, we said 40% of every dollar we spend is going to be spent with a minority or female-owned company.
Right.
We ended up with just barely making 41%. But 41% of that $2.5 billion went into some black people's pocket. So now, the airport is up to almost 50%. So of that $66 billion that they're making this year, almost half of it is getting into the black community. Now, it's not getting in there effectively.
Thank you for saying that, Ambassador.
Well, because, we will, I mean, it almost makes me sick to go shopping because I see all my young people with plenty of money. And I mean, I'm from the school where my daddy really threatened to spank me because I bought some Converse All-Stars for $4.95 when I had been wearing US kids for $1.99.
Right. Me too.
I mean, I got a real lecture. And then I go in and I see tennis shoes for $1,000, $598. I mean, I can't. And we have produced because we've produced a lot of money. We've also given a lot of boost to black culture.
Right.
So one of the kid who was he was the president of the Mayor's Youth Council when I was mayor. Told me that when he was starting a bank, and he asked me, was I going to be one of the investors? I said, I didn't make but $50,000 a year for the 8 years I was mayor. I said, I made everybody else rich, but I'm not rich.
Right.
And he said, that means you didn't make but $400,000 in 8 years? He said, damn. I said, what do you mean? He said, my wife made me turn down a gig that would have made me that much money in one weekend, but she didn't want me to travel because of the COVID.
Right.
See, and I said, yeah. I said, but because I was willing to do that, you have had these opportunities.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
We are running out of time. I got a couple more questions I really, really want to ask you. You've spent a lot of time in Africa. Africa has 70% of the most important minerals on the planet. We have $1.7 trillion annually of disposable income. If we were a nation, we'd be the 16th richest nation in the entire world, Black people in America. And the intellectual and human capital that we have, I believe, can play a huge role in helping Africa get those minerals out of the ground, build business infrastructures in Africa. There's got to be some sort of understanding or partnership or connection between the human and intellectual capital that we bring to the table, the most educated Black people on the planet. And
We're not, but we don't have any Black people in mining.
We don't.
See, and we also don't. I mean, I have worked with African countries, and they have a hard time selling their minerals because the diamond business and the gold business. South Africa may have a Black president, but the Afrikaners still control, and the English still control many of the resources.
Well, they control banking and they control the mines. And
exactly.
Natural resources.
But the Chinese have moved in, and they are taking over.
Yes,
they're bringing in technology, but they're not transferring it to Africans.
Right.
They're using their resources to take Africa's resources, and but the thing is that Africa's got so much that they can't, they can't rape Africa because Africa's power and plenty is much too diverse. But it's been hard, and I've been on the fringe of some of my friends, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't know. I don't know many. I almost can say I don't know any Black Americans that have gone to Africa, made money, and been able to bring it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge fly in the ointment. There's just no question about that. I've talked to a number of moneyed Black businessmen, and
but there are moneyed Africans. See, I mean, there are half a dozen or more African billionaires. Now, one of the things I did, which, like I insisted that Nigeria, for instance, that they had one Dutch company that was controlling all their oil. And when I was at the UN, the first thing I said to the president was, it's just not good. I said, I'm not a businessman, but I know it's not good business to have anybody controlling anything.
Right.
I said, capitalism depends on competition.
Right.
See, and so this is not an American firm. The best thing you can do is get an American firm to come in with this Dutch firm. I mean, and have some competition.
That's right.
Now, I didn't have any preference except that I knew that Condoleezza Rice's name was on one of the oil tankers of Chevron, and that she had been on Chevron's board, and she was Bush's, foreign policy advisor. And I said, I don't know anything about oil companies, but this one I know has some good people in it. And so they brought Chevron in, and Chevron made sure that Africans got access to the oil, as did Nigeria, President Obasanjo. And so we have a half a dozen billionaires in Nigeria, and maybe more than that. But it's not easy.
If Ambassador,
Mhm.
we're down to the final minutes. God forbid if you left us, what would be your message to Black people?
Well, let me just say that I don't believe in leaving. And
Good.
see, I don't believe Martin Luther King left us.
Right.
I mean, it was
But
over 50 years, but in 1968, I would dare say that Martin Luther King is more present in our lives now,
okay.
and that we have more of his wisdom being spoken by more people than we did when he was alive.
Yeah, I love that.
And so my grandmama didn't believe in death. Death is not the end. See, death is just a transition.
Correct.
And the people who have gone before still are here inspiring and guiding us.
Right.
I come up with some crazy notions sometimes, and the only way I kind of feel comfortable about it is that quite often it's related to something that I heard my grandmama say, or that I heard Martin Luther King say. And when I can connect it to my ancestors' spirits, then I know I'm on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, well, man is not flesh and blood. We are spiritual creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And our ancestors knew that, and that's where their power was.
Mm.
See? And so I never forget the spiritual. I never forget that I am a spiritual creature. And everything in this earth and on this earth is related somehow to the spirituality that our ancestors have always talked about. And that's the reason I say, we used to sing a song in the movement. And we'd sing it when times were hard. We'd sing, I got a feeling everything's going to be all right.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the Jamaicans sing, one heart, one love, let's get together and it'll be all right. There is in our culture and our spiritual a power that the more we understand it, the more we are going to be able to control and make a contribution to the salvation of this planet.
There's something I want to, in a book that I wrote 30 years ago called Success Runs in Our Race, The Complete Guide to Effective Networking in the African American Community. Required reading in about 57 historically Black colleges. It's a modern day. I'm not bragging, I'm just saying. But
you need to know that.
In that book 30 years ago, I wrote the following. I wanted our people to understand the difference, and you're talking about it, the difference between how we as Black people think and what our worldview is, and a Eurocentric worldview. So I wrote what I call the comparative paragraph. I just want to read it to you, and I want you to comment on it. A Eurocentric worldview. Order is imposed by the stronger force. The stronger force gains the advantage by ordering the universe as it wishes. An African-centered worldview. The universe is active and alive, and the laws of nature reveal its inherent order as well as the creator's divine laws. Two different worldviews. Finally, Eurocentric thinking, survival of the fittest, promotes a drive for mastery and control of nature and the accumulation of possessions. That's Eurocentric thinking. African centered thinking. There is a oneness of all things. Life is primary and must reflect a divine nature. Group maintenance, collectiveness, and sharing are essential.
Amen.
Two entirely different points of view.
Exactly.
All right. And as we go back to Du
But
Bois,
you know, we have other allies in that, and particularly India.
yes,
The emergent people like Deepak Chopra
right.
Would say the same thing from a he's a physician and scientist, but Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk
That's
that
right.
was a friend of Martin Luther King, that I think that it was Martin's relationship to him that pushed him forward to come out against the war in Vietnam.
That's right.
But
in fact, Ambassador,
you're absolutely right.
In fact, what you said, though, but you punctuated it. I don't know how you knew what I wrote, but I actually said in a different way exactly what you said. I said Afrocentricity is not merely a Black thing. Any person or culture can use it. In fact, various components of Afrocentricity are quite evident in several cultures. Right, so we don't have an exclusive on it, but it's just our worldview. We are different, and Du Bois talked about that in his classic book about the duality of the life in which we have to live. I'm paraphrasing.
Well, I realized when I came to work with Martin Luther King that I didn't know any. I'd never read Du Bois. Well, I'd read Soul of Black Folk, but when I looked for the Black book, Black Reconstruction, it wasn't in print anymore. And I found one in a Harlem bookstore up there on 125th Street.
Yeah.
On the corner, and it was a used book. But we started recommending it and getting bookstores to order. They finally reprinted his books. I wrote a book right after Martin died, and it took me a while to get it printed. I got turned down. I got paid and then turned down by 3 publishers.
Wow.
And it was for their political reasons.
Right.
And finally, I got it published for political reasons because they had given Newt Gingrich $4 million to write a book, and he had not written it. And they were in trouble. So they came back to me and said, "Can we publish your book?" And I said, "Sure." Now, the only problem was I refused to say who killed Martin Luther King. And I wrote a chapter on the politics of assassination, in which I listed all of the people around that time. Malcolm, Walter Reuther with the United Auto Workers. I mean, there were just so many mysterious deaths that I refused to say that any one person was responsible for them. But I didn't know and didn't care, see, who was ultimately responsible. But that was the only thing they could criticize me for. And everybody that reviewed my book criticize that chapter. Now, the other thing is, it's the only book that I didn't have a ghostwriter. I dictated it on a old big, two-wheel
Right.
tape recorder, and the person who told me to do that was Toni Morrison. And I had 1,100 pages of manuscript, and then my daughter cut it down to 500 pages.
Wow.
Let me interject. Ambassador, is it still in print? And people want.
It's just come out again. I just had it reprinted because I thought An Easy Burden.
An Easy Burden. So it is available now.
It's available now, and I wanted it to come out because I think that Black Lives Matter was a tremendous movement, but they were like I was when I started. I had to go back and read Du Bois before to put some context into how we were leading the demonstrations. See? And I think that whether they agree with me or not, they need to go back and see what we saw, because nobody has been any more successful than Martin Luther King between 1955 and 1970. And even after his death, they were still passing legislature that he had inspired and written.
That's right.
I'm going to add the final question because you've been very generous. We've gone over the time that has been allotted. I love you for that. Thank you so much. There's so much good in this. And so I'm going to frame up my last question by just a very simple story that happened to me. I was being interviewed by the media, and the reporter asked me, Dr. Fraser, what would you like on your tombstone? And I laughed. I said, I never really thought about that. And then I took 30 seconds and I thought about it. I said, the only thing I think I really want carved on my tombstone, other than my name and the year I was born and the dash to the year I died, it would only be 2 words. He mattered. In other words, I mattered. I mean, what life God gave me, it mattered. What would you like?
Nobody's ever asked me that.
Right. No one had ever asked me. So
I really have not thought about it. Now, my first wife died of cancer after we'd been married 40 years. And what she put on her tombstone, and she said she wanted it. She said, now that was a woman.
Wow. I love that.
But I haven't, well, the other song, I keep so busy serving my master, I ain't got time to die.
Oh, right? Yeah.
And I ain't got time.
You're not going to die.
I ain't got time to think about it even.
Mm-hmm.
So, but someday somebody will come up with something.
Mm-hmm. I think I planted a seed. I think you're going to come up with it at some point in time, because you are a wordsmith and you have meant so much to Black people and to the world. And if there is a message to Black people, what would that message be?
Keep on keeping on.
There you go. I was going to say, keep on pushing. There you go. I don't know why I felt you were going. That's where you were going to go. Yeah. Well, this has been.
That was. I think that was the way my grandmama put it, but it was the impressions that said, "Keep on pushing."
That's right. That's right. Curtis Mayfield wrote that. That's right. Right. Now that I think about it, maybe that might be a good 3 words to put on my tombstone.
You got it, Dr. G.
Well, God loves you, and I love you. Certainly, the Black world loves you, and there are a whole lot of white people that love you too.
Well, I tell you what, I grew up in a neighborhood where it was an Irish grocery store on one corner, an Italian bar on another. The Nazi party was on the third corner, and they were Highland Hitler when I was born.
Wow.
And the Chevrolet dealership on the fourth corner. So I was born in New Orleans, right in the middle of all of the. And I said, my daddy wanted me to be a dentist because he was a dentist.
Mhm.
But I said I almost had to be a diplomat to get to the grocery store, you know, and then I had to go into the 7th Ward in New Orleans to Valita C. Jones Public School. And I had to be, you know, I had to negotiate my way in and out of that neighborhood because I didn't live there. So I've been blessed.
You have. And you blessed us. And God bless you.
My grandmama used to say, you got to pass on your blessings, son.
Yes.
And
Well, what I like to do is take
that you've done. You've done that. You've done
yes,
that.
Dr. G.
You've
As
done
we
that.
wrap up, Ambassador, I do not want Pedro to beat me up. So I want to shout out to thanks Dr. G. I want everybody to know, because Dr. G and I were talking about it backstage, that on March the 12th, 2022, somebody has a birthday coming up, and it's this man down here. His name is Ambassador Young. He will be turning 90 on March the 12th, 2022. And Pedro told me I better say this. So here we go, Ambassador. For those who are in the Georgia area on March the 12th, which is a Saturday, and are remotely interested in participating in the celebration of this great man, I will be there. Please go to andrewyoung.org. Again, that's andrewyoung.org. There's a lot of information in there for his celebration. There's information where you can donate 1 cent, $1, whatever. Ambassador has always, as Dr. G says, gracefully hosted me, never asked me for any honorariums. The least we can do, world, is pour back into his foundation, which he is truly dear to.
Well, and the foundation, I mean, I think that you all have helped me realize and to pull out ideas that have yet to be developed. And we have made progress in everything we've done, and we've been successful, but it takes time, it takes money, and nothing worthwhile ever happens in one generation.
That's right.
And so I've tried my best to carry on Martin Luther King's work and message, but there are things that he hadn't thought of. For instance, we've got to feed the world. And there's an article in the paper today about Nigeria having a hard time feeding. There'll be almost 300 million people there before long.
And still one of the wealthiest countries.
It is.
In Africa, with one of the largest oil reserves in Africa. And so let me say.
But they also have some of the smartest people. My granddaughter married a Nigerian, and she said, "Papa, I'm thinking about marrying a Nigerian, a fella." And I said, "He's from Nigeria." I said, "Well, I've never met a dumb Nigerian."
Right, they're very smart.
Now I met some slick ones.
That's a whole nother. We can spend
another conversation.
But I've never met a dumb Nigerian.
No question.
And he's a great son-in-law, grandson-in-law, and I think we've got a lot of work to do, but that's what life is about. Life is about doing the Lord's work and loving it.
That's right. That's right. The difference between purpose and passion, right? Purpose is your service to others. Passion is what sets you on fire, right? But so thank you again so much. You've been a gentleman and a scholar, and
it's my privilege.
I love you. Keep doing God's work.
Okay.
Thank you, Bella. Let's stay connected.
Absolutely. Ambassador, this is really the final question. I have to say this. I just came back from Tanzania. As you all know, East Africa. I have about 40 new family members that's on here. They're talking in Swahili, which they know I don't know Swahili that well. But the general question has been from the people that I have met and I've connected with, and Dr. G and I are talking about relationship building, right? Ambassador, they're asking, what advice can you give the Tanzanians just in
Well,
terms of what they are?
Tanzania, the founding president of Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, was one of my spiritual and political fathers. He guided us in leading South Africa and Zimbabwe and Namibia to independence. And I worked with him very closely. And Tanzania is one of my favorite countries. They are beautiful, powerful, brilliant people. It's a wonderful place. And they've had good governance. And they've had a series of good presidents. And I want to learn from them. And I don't think we ought to be giving advice. We ought to be partners with our African brothers.
And we agree. Ambassador, they just ask because they love you, they know you, and they just want to sit at your feet.
Well, I would, that's the only thing about turning 90 and this pandemic is that I got a phone call when it first started from a friend of mine in Tanzania saying he had this virus and was asking me what was I doing to take, to prevent it and keep from getting it, which I haven't gotten it. And he survived. But that's an area where we've got to do a lot of sharing both ways, because there's some things that we learned about traditional healing and the natural substances that they use. For instance, in not Tanzania, but Senegal, their soil is rich in selenium. So they don't get these kind of diseases as much as people do in areas where there's no selenium in the soil. And we've been working with traditional healers to try to help them catalog the healing that has kept Africa alive. They were doing all right before anybody Western got there. And these are people who have survived from the Stone Age. So I want to learn from them, and I've learned a lot from, say, Sheikh Anta Diop, the African origins of civilization. And he had to get 4 PhDs before he got that book certified by the Sorbonne.
Right.
And because it's such a broad study of the culture of Egypt and how it related to Europe and Greece and Africa, and also the Bible.
Amen.
Dr. Dr. G, close it out.
Well, all I can say is we are all sitting at the feet of a master. We cherish these moments. We hope that they last forever, but they will not. The moment will last forever. And hopefully our presence, and as you stated, our spirit will last forever. And whether we have a chance to meet again, face to face, heart to heart, spirit to spirit, that's a question only God can answer. But I know that this moment, for me, and I believe the listeners will be cherished forever. Again, thank you, Ambassador Young.
And thank you, and God bless you.
And God bless you. And
Bella, thank you.
keep doing God's work. Thank you.